Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bob Driscoll, and I'm your proud athletic director here at Providence College. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to Homecoming at Home. First of all, I hope you and your family are safe and well during these really difficult times. And I'm just thrilled that you're here with us tonight. When I think about Friartown, I think about resiliency, I think about togetherness, I think about family. And as we continue to navigate these unprecedented times, I'm confident that we will rise up to meet this occasion together. Tonight, you turned into a conversation on race and sports. But before I introduce our moderator and some of our outstanding panelists, I just wanted to share how excited and thrilled I am for this really important conversation. I'm really thrilled that our student athletes have taken a leadership role in anti-racism and the supporting of social justice. Our men's and women's basketball team will be wearing the Black Lives patches on their sleeves when they play in Big East competition. And under the great leadership of our teammate, Nick Saylor, we do weekly workshops on how to be great allies in supporting our men and women of color. We all know that too many men and women of color are dying in our streets every single day, and Providence College and our student athletes need to continue to be leaders in this important area. And I'm thrilled that we're having this conversation here tonight. So it's my pleasure to introduce Rudy Klein Thomas, class of 2000. Rudy is the founder and managing partner of Mastery Incorporated, a company that specializes in identifying technology, retail, media, and investment opportunities for partners, which will include Fortune 500 companies, early startups, and professional athletes. Rudy will be leading our conversation with some of my favorite Friar athletes from Providence as we address this really, really important initiative. So thank you for spending the time with us tonight, and thank you for helping us be a leader in this important initiative, anti-racism and social justice. Let's remember, as always, go Friars.
So thank you, Bob. Thank you for that warm introduction. I'm looking forward to kicking off today a conversation on race and diversity at Providence College. I want to start out by introducing some of our panelists today. We have Britt King. Please welcome Britt King, Hall of Famer and former women's basketball star.
Hello, everyone.
We also have James Best, class of 1988, former PC men's basketball player and member of the 1987 Final Four team.
Hello, everyone.
Please welcome Meg Anyundo, class of 2019 women's volleyball.
Hi, everyone.
And please welcome men's soccer in class of 2017's Nick Saylor.
What's going on, everybody?
And I'm Rudy Klein Thomas, class of 2000, founder and managing partner of Mastery Inc. And I'd like to start by sharing my experience of coming to Providence College. I'll share a personal anecdote first. I remember Providence was my last visit that I took. And I remember my parents telling me that I was definitely coming there. So again, it wasn't my decision. My mother made that decision for me, coming from Washington, D.C., and it was the best decision that anyone's ever made for me in my life. Coming from Washington, D.C., and with the bubble that I lived in, PC was definitely a culture shock for me. But that culture shock opened up so many new opportunities, so many new friendships, and allowed me to see life in a different angle that greatly helped all my experiences once I graduated from college. And it always reminds me of how grateful I am to have that experience once I go back home. And then also just seeing what my personal experience has been and my growth has been versus a lot of the guys that I grew up with and people that I grew up with in Washington, D.C. as well, too. And I couldn't be more grateful for that opportunity and for the decision that my mother made for me. And again, it's the reason why I'm also here today to share more of it with these panelists as well, too. So I wanted to kick off the conversation. It's going to be very, very much in depth. It's going to be very, very personal. So let's have some fun today. And I want to start off by asking each and every one of you, what do you hope to gain from this conversation today? I'll start with you.
I'm sorry, Rudy.
Oh, sorry, Britt. Go ahead, Britt. Kick it
Well,
off.
what I would hope to share is really just my experience. And I think some of the experiences I had at Providence College will be the same for some people, as whether it's good or bad. And I think Providence College has definitely grown in diversity since I attended. So hopefully by me sharing my story, and my experiences, hopefully it will help other minorities as they, attend Providence College and deal with some of the same experiences.
That's really great. What about you, Nick? I picked on you first.
Yeah, when I think about this question, I think it's twofold. It's similar to Britt, sharing my own experience and, graduating the class of 2017 was a very unique time at PC, but also I think there's power in sharing our story and being together and doing so. And I think in some ways, just being together with you all, albeit virtually, I think you get some of that strength and rejuvenation just by being able to share, our experiences and our hopes and what we hope for Providence College in this space in the future. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to get out of it. And again, I'm just really excited to be here and hopefully have some fun as well.
That's great. James, how about you?
Yeah, for me, it's really about, having an opportunity to not only share my story, but to let other people see, when minorities do go to Providence College, what can happen to them? Where can they end up? What travels do they get to experience in their lives, and how that reflects on who they become? So for me, when the opportunity came up to be able to speak, I got really excited because, you can do both. You can kind of share your experiences, but also relate to others, and they can kind of look and see what you've done, and maybe they can say to themselves, that might be a good decision for me as well. So that's what kind of got me excited about doing this.
That's great. And Meg, what about you?
Yeah, I'm really excited, of course, to tell about my experience at PC, but I really hope to gain an insight of just how the culture within PC athletics has changed, hearing the stories from Britt and James from the past and how things have changed. I was actually part of the diversity board that we put together that helped make new positions within the athletics department, who hired Nick, which I'm very excited that he's on board with the program. And so I'm really excited to hear about those new changes from the past and to the work that I helped do to see how it's affected the PC athletics community today.
That's great. That's great. It's good that you guys were definitely a part of that. And I think that speaks a lot to the evolution of race and diversity on campus with a lot of those initiatives that have started. It definitely wasn't in place when I was there. And I wanted to actually go back and talk about each and every one of you guys' personal experience on the court. Britt, I'll start with you again. We all came to the school at different times, and I'd love you to talk about, again, your experience on the court, but, what was going on in the world at that time as well, too. Because, again, we all went to school at different periods and different things were happening at those different periods.
Well, for me, on the court, I had a great experience with my teammates. I was the only Black on the team for 3 of my 4 years. I like to say 3.5 because we did have another young lady who lasted maybe a semester. And I guess it wasn't, culture wasn't diverse enough and she left on the winter. So being the only Black, and Rudy, I'm from Washington, D.C. I went to St. Anthony's in Northeast. So going from an all Black high school to a school that is not diverse, I mean, it was definitely a shocker for me culturally. But thankfully for my teammates, color was not an issue. Even though I was the only Black, our goal was to win. My freshman year, we won the Big East, which was the first year for the Big East for the women's tournament. We lost in the championship game to St. John's. My senior year, we won the regular season Big East conference tournament as well. We didn't win the tournament, but we won the conference. So in my years there, I believe we finished 88-31. That was my career record at PC. Wow. So I had a really good experience, with my teammates. I think culturally, the biggest difference for us was really in the music. I mean, they want to listen to Madonna and Bruce Springsteen, and I want to listen to Run DMC and Cameo. Right. People argue about the music. But anything that, culturally, if there was I wouldn't say issue because I really don't want to call it an issue. If there was a difference, we would talk about it. You know, me coming from an all black high school, all black neighborhood, one of the questions I had was, why do white people wash their hair every day? I mean, I didn't understand why. And for some of my teammates who had never even had a conversation with a black person, they wanted to know why we didn't wash our hair every day.
Right.
So back then, it was not a conversation where people felt defensive. It was really a learning and informative kind of conversation. So, you know, even though, as I said, I was only black on the team for 3.5 years, I never felt like that was an issue on the court and with my teammates. And even today, we're still friends. So I'm very thankful for the relationships and friendships that I built through my experience at PC.
Do you think that being an athlete and having that camaraderie with the team atmosphere actually helped with kind of being engaged? Do you think it would have been completely different if you didn't play sports?
Oh, I know it would have been. I had friends who did not play sports, and the struggle was real. I mean, for me, the biggest struggle was like during the wintertime when the men's basketball team, if they went away and it was just, you know, us on campus, I mean, I could go days and not see a black person. So for me, the psychic of not seeing anyone that looked like me, I mean, it was a struggle at times. But I mean, I'm thankful for my teammates. I mean, I think they helped me through some of the hardest times for me psychologically.
Right. And then that talks about the power of sports as well too, and the barriers that it's able to break too. You know, a lot of your experience. James, you wanna hop onto that as well too? Talk about your experience on the court and what was going on.
I'm a little bit behind Britt, not too far, but the experience was a little bit different being on the men's basketball team because there were a number of African American players on that team, and if anything, the minority would have been the white players. Even though on campus, you know, we're in the minority. The time period in which I went, MLK scholarship was getting established. So you had about 30 or 40 students on campus from that vein. And then you had the athletes on campus. And that was pretty much the makeup of African Americans on campus. I became friends with an African American that was not on the basketball team. And he was from Providence. So he was able to expose me to some more of the culture or African-American culture within the Providence area. But on the court, I mean, it was a magical time and a magical team. You know, 3 out of our 5 coaches ended up being head coaches in the NBA.
Right.
And it was kind of like that chemistry. And when I think about when we get together as a group, it's almost like we all just fall back in line of how we were then. So on the court, the experience was really good. Off the court is a little bit more difficult. I was a part of the group that started Young Democrats at Providence College. And that came about because I got injured and I had a little bit more time. So my experience was both. I got to experience as an athlete and as well as not an athlete. But when I go back and think about that time, it was a magical season too, where, you know, the beginning of that season, we played against the Russian national team and won that game. And the end of that season ended up us going to the Final Four. So in that kind of atmosphere, I think some of the racial issues don't really come to fruition like they would if you're not in that type of atmosphere. So that's really kind of like the experience for me.
Were you able to share a lot of the experiences or hear a lot of them of the students that weren't athletes at all going on, you know, during that time and period?
Yeah, as I said, I became friends with one of the gentlemen that wasn't an athlete. And so when I was injured, I got to spend a lot of time with the students that didn't play sport and got to see some of the things that they faced as challenges. And as Britt mentioned, it was a different experience when I looked through their lens as opposed to my lens. I think when you're playing athletics at a university, you're sheltered in certain ways because you're pretty much always with the team. And when you step out of that, it is a lot different experience. And people don't really look at you the same, in my view, because you kind of like, again, you get the red carpet rolled out to you when you're on a team. And when you're not, I can see people really have to find their way.
Right, for sure. Meg, what about you and your experience, if you don't mind sharing?
Of course. So I played for Coach Royer from 2015 to 2019. And for me, it was a hard transition, but I think it was a little bit different than Britt's transition. So I'm also from the DMV area, specifically Northern Virginia. But from where I grew up, it's a little bit more diverse. So I grew up in a place where there were white, Black, Indian, and then the list just goes on. And so I was really immersed in that growing up, and I didn't really understand, I think, the world outside of that and how places weren't like that.
Right.
So going to Providence, it was a little bit of a shock to see not white people in general, but the type of white people, if that makes sense. Within athletics, it's its own community, kind of similar to what James was saying. It's a different world if you're in athletics and not in athletics, because athletes, even if you are white or any of that, they're all coming from different places within the country, even outside of the country. So they have that diverse aspect. So I definitely see and relate to what James was saying there. But with regards to volleyball, it's a little bit different than all the other sports and the teams here today. With regards to basketball and soccer, volleyball is definitely a transitioning program. So I came in, they had just left the American East. And so we were now transitioning into the Big East, playing bigger and better teams. And that's something we were really excited about. So I was excited to join this team and transition to being better and competing against these teams. So it was hard in that way for me. I was coming from a team here in the DC area that was, on a winning streak. And so now I'm coming to this team that's maybe not the top, but we are really excited to get better each and every day. And so my junior year was actually one of our most successful starts to our season. We actually started with a 11-game winning streak, which is just unheard of, starting off a season that way within the NCAA in any sport.
Right.
So that was kind of a memorable time for me. And so something I really took away from within athletics, and my coach always loved saying, grit and gratitude. I don't think I really understood that until now, but grit, you have to work hard for what you want. And so that's kind of our team philosophy, because we were at the bottom of the Big East, and we had to, make our way up and fight through those games. And then gratitude, always being thankful for the things you have and the things that are given to us. Because, in athletics, we work hard every single day, but we do get things like, for example, this jacket, we get the gear, we get the one thing and the other that other people don't get. And so always being grateful for the things that are given to us. So, yeah.
No, that's great. That's a great experience. Nick, how about you?
Yeah, when I look back on my time at PC, similar to what you were saying earlier about how your mom made that decision. I remember coming on a recruiting trip and my mom really feeling comfortable with one of our assistant coaches, John Mark. And she would always say to coach, like, you're going to look after my son. Like, I know everybody else is here, but you are going to look after my son. And would literally, when she come to games, she loved soccer, but she didn't really care about all that. She was like, how's my son doing? Is he doing okay? Yeah, but so for me, fortunately enough, during my time, we had a really fantastic run. We were a part of some really great seasons. We won the Big East in 2014. We made it to the Final Four my sophomore year. And then my senior year, we made it to the Elite Eight, won the regular season Big East championship. We beat the #1 team in the country in the second round of the NCAA tournament. Real great historic comeback. Was grateful to be a part of that. And kind of listening into everybody else, it really made me think about how some of the experiences I had were very similar in recognizing that difference between what it was like to be an athlete and what it was like to not be an athlete, as far as some of the challenges that people of color face and Black athletes and Black students just in general. And we were, during my time period, we were going through a lot of changes and we had a number of protests on campus, and it really sort of shaped a lot of my experience in thinking about how, like James said, you're kind of in this bubble, yet at the same time, you're still you're not void of those things. You're still, you know, a young Black student on campus. Yes, you're an athlete. Yes, you get the gear. Yes, they know who you are. But at the end of the day, you're still racialized and seen in that light. So having to navigate those two things at times can be challenging. But it was something that, you know, for me now working back at PC in this DEI role in athletics, I always think about how my time as a student athlete, you know, shaped me to come back and really made me want to come back and say, if I could, you know, ever have the opportunity to come do some good work, you know, to help student athletes like myself, I would do so. So it's really great to kind of be back, having reflected on my experience.
Yeah, that's great. You know, I think that we all, you know, people on the outside think that Providence is much bigger than it is, right? You know, people, when I talk about how big the student body is, they can't believe how small it is, right? You know, and that says a lot. And, you know, I think we all have an affinity for our experience. And, you know, again, we're very, very much grateful for it, but everybody doesn't have that same experience, you know. And what I want to talk about is kind of the evolution of race and diversity on campus, you know, and a lot of you guys spoke to some of the initiatives. You know, James is part of a big initiative that he helped start when he was at school. But, you know, we've seen the evolution of initiatives. Some of them have lived on, some of them haven't. And I want to talk about that. You know, again, you guys were somewhat insulated by being athletes, but again, you experience exactly certain things that happen on campus. So I wanted to talk about some of the evolution of things that have happened, what you experienced or you didn't experience, and how it's evolved over time on campus. So Britt, I'll start with you.
Well, you know, I'm from the generation of, you know, in the 80s, we as Blacks were told this is the way it is,
Mm-hmm.
and deal with it. And
Right.
that's why I'm so proud of the young kids now, because when they are told this is the way it is, they protest and say we're not taking it.
Right.
So one of the things that when I attended Providence College, my freshman year, Patrick Ewing, who was at that time one of the top, you know, basketball players in the country, highly recruited, he was at Georgetown.
Mm-hmm.
And when they came to play Providence, some students had signs in the stands that said that he couldn't read,
Mm-hmm.
and some other, you know, racial things at the time. Well, it made top news. It was national news. Everybody through, you know, in the country saw the highlights of Providence College students holding up signs. And John Thompson at the time, he took his team off the court and said he wouldn't come back on the court until those signs were removed. Now, we as the Black students on campus, it was less than 50 of us. We were all hurt and embarrassed by that. But during that time, we didn't feel like we weren't empowered. We didn't feel like we had a right to say something or do something about it. And for us, the embarrassment of having to go back to our communities and explain why we're walking around with a Providence College shirt on, and in their eyes, we go to a school that's racist, you know, and insensitive to us as Blacks. And during that time, Providence College never actually addressed it with us. We were invisible. It was as if we weren't part of the Black culture or affected by what happened. You know, if something like that were to happen today, it would definitely be something different. But during that time, that was, you know, it was an embarrassing time to be a Black at Providence College, knowing that the people that you share, you know, seats in the classroom with were the ones that felt that way about someone from your community.
Right.
And so, I mean, that was the biggest thing. And then to be honest, it's kind of embarrassing. We didn't do anything about it. You know, we talked about it. I don't know at PC now, but our little meeting place was the cafeteria.
Right.
In that back corner, we had 2 tables.
Right.
And at lunchtime and at dinner time, that's where we all sat. And
same place. Yeah.
Every time. That was our diversity board meeting as we ate. And during that time, we talked about it among ourselves, but from an administrative standpoint, they never said anything, never addressed it with us. So at Providence, is it still like that, where all the Blacks sit at a certain table? And
really
the funniest,
it's really funny that you say that. It's maybe a little bit different nowadays, but every sports team has their spot where they sit. So for example, basketball sits in the front, volleyball usually sits on the tie tops, swimming has their table, ice hockey has their table, like everyone has their spots. And so it's not technically divided by race, but within sports definitely is still that way.
Megan, it was so funny. That cafeteria could be packed full, and those two tables, nobody would sit at it because it was if it was considered a Black's table, but they would not sit at those two tables.
Well, Britt, you
Well,
know,
I'll add
what's
in.
interesting.
It's a little bit different being on the men's basketball team playing for Rick Pitino because he consumes so much of our time. I mean, the reason why the 20-hour rule is in college sports today is because of him. We would practice 3 times a day and have to do our classes. So that issue never really crossed our plate because we were always amongst ourselves. 5 o'clock in the morning practice, and then you have 1 or 2 classes, then you have individual instruction, and then you have regular practice, and then you had study hall. And by then it's 10 o'clock. So from 5 a.m. till 10 p.m., our time was consumed. So it was a little bit different experience.
Oh, he definitely prepped you for the real world. I mean, it's been downhill ever since Providence College for you, James, for real.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, I'm never late for anything, and my kids laugh at me, and they're just like, and I'm like, yeah, I've been trained. When you've been trained for like that for years, it's second nature. But it's interesting to me to hear, Britt speak, and then to hear the younger athletes speak, and then to think about my experience and how they were all different, and really me and Britt's experience is pretty close together. I'm pretty much right behind her, and I think our group or our age group was one that started to kind of like put that imprint down, started to develop groups on campus and so forth. So, and I didn't really get to experience that until that one year that I was injured. I wouldn't even have really even known about it until then. And then once I did get injured and I met with my friend and he took me to the MLK meetings, and it was a whole new world. I was like, wow, I didn't even know this was happening. So it was really this duality that was happening on campus that I wasn't even aware of.
That's really interesting.
Because we actually, when I went to Providence, we actually attended the MLK meetings, even though we weren't part of the scholarship, but it was a opportunity for us to all get together and, just talk about issues we were having and share, solutions. And so that, I guess you could say that was our diversity, our DEI board meeting. Every time they had a meeting, and I can't remember his name now, who was head of it, but he would always have some juice and cookies, and that was another motivation to go.
Nick, I have a question for you. During your time as a student athlete, there were a lot of issues on campus nationally regarding racial injustice. Like, how did that define any of your experience at school?
Yeah, so one of the things that was that I think about a lot was my senior year was 2016, and that was the year that Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee. And so we had this really sort of interesting moment, and I was the Student Athlete Advisory Council president. And I remember at the time, the conversation about why Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee was getting diverted to patriotism, right? It wasn't actually about police brutality, and seeing that happen as a Black student and a Black student athlete was really frustrating. And yet trying to play that line where I recognize that we're a school that's traditionally conservative, predominantly white, has strong military backgrounds, while also still trying to stand up for what I think we all should really be, fighting against, right? Systemic injustice, police brutality. So it was a really interesting time because, Britt, you brought it up earlier about how athletes now, they're utilizing their voice and they're standing up. And I think even in this short window between 2016 to 2020, even the evolution of just the college athlete voice is, dramatically changed. So I think in that time period, it kind of laid some of that foundation to really start, pushing and thinking about, well, what if, a student athlete at PC took a knee? What would happen if, 25,000 fans, or not 25,000, like 12,000 fans at the Dunkin' Donuts Center saw our basketball athletes, protesting, and now to just kind of see where it is. So it really did shape my time. And being a soccer player, it's a really interesting sport because it's diverse, but there's not a lot of Black Americans that were on the soccer team. So you had, you might have Black folk, but they might be international, or you might have people from all over the place, but you still feel kind of isolated in some degree because of that element of your experience, right? As a Black American, there, it was me and my homie BK, that was really it. And so to try to navigate, what that was like specifically, was really challenging. So, in some ways I'm kind of fortunate that I struggled in that space, because I think now coming back and, trying to help, our guys and our coaches and our staff kind of think through that and not have our student athletes now feel like they're isolated and feel like they don't have a voice in empowering them, I think is important. So I definitely had to wrestle with that, and it was tough. It was not easy, and some difficult conversations. Some teammates, let me down. Some administrators, I was confused. I thought you supported me, and just those weird sort of moments. But I think overall, better for it now, and having the opportunity to kind of shape where we're going presently.
That's great. That's good feedback. Meg, you're one of the only ones here that you're a Black woman, but you play in a predominantly white sport, as it attributes to the representation, of people of color in volleyball. Did it have an effect on your experience whatsoever?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it definitely did. I was very fortunate. Like I said before, I grew up in a very diverse place. So playing volleyball in Northern Virginia, in DC, I had probably one of the most diverse teams you'll ever see when it comes to volleyball. We'd show up in the gym, people would be confused probably because there were so many white and Black people just on one team. But then coming to PC, something that Coach Royer did, and something that actually came and brought me to the team, was seeing that diversity on the volleyball team. Diversity when it came to location. I mean, as being from Northern Virginia, I was the third closest to PC driving distance. And that says a lot because it takes me about 9 hours to get there.
Right.
And so we also had, people of Asian descent, as well as African-American and white. So within athletics and being on the volleyball team, I didn't really have as many issues, but when looking outside of the team, that's kind of where the issues began. And something I've actually been thinking about a lot more recently is how, comparing yourself to others, because it's such a natural thing to compare yourself to others around you. And the majority of people around me were 5 foot, blonde, white females that attended the school, the people that took the class and the classes that I took. So if I was trying to compare myself to them, I can't. I mean, I'm 5'11". I'm huge compared to them. I tower over these girls. I'm not a size 0. It's like not possible for that to happen. And so in comparing myself to those types of people, it can't be done. And I think that definitely affected my mental health while being at school. And so just now realizing that and changing my mindset to say, like, I can't be like them. I'm going to do my best, who I am. I'm whatever size I am, and I'm going to be happy and proud of, all the hard work I put in the gym. I'm going to have strong legs. I play volleyball. It's going to happen. But yeah, so it was, I think, maybe a little bit different experience from what Britt had, because if she was saying she was one of the only Black players on her team. But yeah.
That's great. I want to talk to you guys about just moving forward. Did you guys feel any, actually, Britt, I'll go right back to you. Let's talk about off the court now and socially. I'm not sure if you engaged in a lot of, the activities, whether it be on campus or off campus. But I wanted to talk to you about your experience there, when you got outside the confines of your team aspect. And again, even if you were with teammates, how you felt in those social situations. Did you have any social pressure at all? Did you feel comfortable in those situations generally? And if there are any incidents that did happen that made you feel somewhat out of place or gave you somewhat of a shock, if you don't mind sharing those.
I don't mind at all. It's funny, the first night, my freshman year, my first night on campus, the other freshmen on my floor, actually, they invited me to a party. So we walked off campus to a party. And at the party, for me, the first time going to a party hosted, you know, by non-blacks. When we walked in and all the lights were on first, that was a shocker. I'm like, I thought we were going to a party. And then to see everyone in the living room circling around a keg. And
Right.
that was like the center of the party. Everybody's drinking from a keg. And to me, that's not a party.
Right.
So probably after 30 minutes or so, I mean, I was bored. I walked back to campus and went in my room and started watching television. And for me, socially, I mean, I was never a drinker. For one. Two, to me, that's not a party. I mean, you're just in the room drinking. For me and for my culture, a party is when there's music. The music is the centerpiece of the party. And that's how you define, well, that, and if there's good looking guys, that's how you define whether or not the party was good.
Right.
When I was, you know, back in college, I could go to a party and there'd be no alcohol and have a blast, you know, because the music was good, the guys were good looking, you know, and so for me, socially, that was a struggle. And so sometimes some of my, you know, other freshmen on my floor, I think they consider me antisocial because I wouldn't go out to drink with them. But for me, that wasn't fun. That wasn't entertaining. I know a couple of times some of my other friends that went out to bars, they would get into arguments and fights because once the white students started getting drunk, their filter went away. So they would say some things that were very offensive, and that would start a fight. So I didn't want to be put in those situations either. So even though I didn't drink, I didn't go with them to put myself in that situation to have to endure that. So that's why socially, sometimes it was a struggle to, you know, hang out with the other students. But I was fortunate because at the time, two of my classmates from St. Anthony's, they went to Brown. And Brown was at the time very diverse, and they had some really good parties.
Right.
You know, in fact, I don't know if they still had a radio station, but they had a radio station that on Sundays played all the good music. And so we would go over to Brown and we would party there. So I got to know students from Brown, from URI, some people from Boston, and I built friendships with a lot of them just because it was an opportunity to socialize and enjoy myself in that aspect.
Yeah, you know, my experience was similar to yours as well too. I think that the city of Providence actually saved me in developing a lot of the relationships that I had. So again, I had friends that went to Brown, but I really enjoyed the city, you know, coming from DC as well too. That was really, really important for me to be able to have the city as an outlet. You know, again, I remember going to my first party, again, seeing the keg as well too, and not knowing exactly what the hell was going on, you know. And to be honest with you guys, again, to be extremely candid, I never drank, you know, beer while I was in college and haven't till this day. And again, you know how it is, you know, not being a beer drinker at all and having a college experience, especially at PC, right? So there's only so many places you could go and feel and feel like you're part of the establishment or exact, you know, have fun, shall I say. But again, it was lucky that we were in Providence and I was able to experience the city and everything that it had to offer and build those relationships as well too. You know, I want to open up the floor to all of you guys as well too, to see if anybody else, just to double back on the question that I asked previously about, you know, your being away from the team and what experiences that you might have had culturally within the student body, you know, and or off campus.
So to add on to what Britt was saying, I think one thing that it seems similar, I think, is that there's this distinction between, like, you know, you have like Black parties and you have, you know, majority parties, and that thing still exists today. And I think one of the challenges is that, you know, there's the way in which if you attend one or don't attend one, you know, you're considered, you know, antisocial at all. You don't have these friends or whatever the case is. So it's a tough thing to navigate, especially as you're trying to find your sense of, you know, belonging, right? Especially in a place where it's the majority isn't like you, right? So in order to navigate the space, you do have to try to put yourself in spaces where you can make those friends. And yet at the same time, like you were saying, Britt, unfortunately, you know, sometimes people get loose in their filter, you know, is not where it needs to be, and the things that you have to endure and having to navigate that. And I think especially too, if you're someone who's visible, right? So, I have short hair now, but back in the day, I had long locks. Who I was just by virtue of my hair. And so just there's times where, you being visible and being in certain spaces could be challenging because you didn't want to necessarily just continue to endure some of those things while also trying to build up relationships so you don't feel isolated like you already do to some degree because you're, a Black student athlete, right? You have your people, but everybody else has so many people in it, and
Right.
trying to navigate that space. So I think those same struggles are still prevalent today.
Yeah.
Another thing that happened when I was there, Balfour was extremely forward thinking and trying to create those environments as well too, whether it be parties or again just gatherings as well too, where the athletes and all the students of color also came together, whether it be every couple of weeks or once a month. But again, they were forthright in creating those events for us, to where we could commune and feel comfortable. May, you were going to say something?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna kind of go along with what Nick was saying. And with regards to, so for volleyball, we play during the fall, and our senior spring is the one time during the whole entire 4 years where we don't have athletics, which is weird to think about. It's like a free semester. But during that time, since you're not as close with your team, you have to find, that camaraderie somewhere else within the campus, which is kind of what Nick was saying before. And for me personally, it was actually really hard to find other students of color on campus because all the people who were students of color all knew each other because of the MLK scholarship. So that, which James kind of talked about a little bit earlier with it being formed during his time. Nowadays, it's still kind of the same with a majority of the African-American students are funded through that, and they all know each other because they all go to attend the same meetings. I didn't attend those meetings and I didn't know about the meetings. So for me, it was a little bit harder to find, students outside of athletics who I could become friends with and to be able to go to those Black parties. Because again, I had a similar experience as Britt. I did not really enjoy going to white parties. I didn't enjoy kind of standing there and staring at each other. But for me, something that was a lifesaver is I actually got a part-time job on campus. So I worked at Academic Media Services, which is just a great organization. They assist professors all throughout campus with any, technical tech things, projectors not working, things like that. And that department is huge on, hiring minority students and just hiring students in general that need a job. So I met so many of my African-American friends through that job, in which, going into that spring semester, I was able to find those types of students who I'm still friends with to today. So.
That's awesome. James, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's interesting when I listen to the younger groups and the older groups and how that's bridged. I'm originally from New York City, but I actually went to high school in New Hampshire. So coming to Providence, it wasn't a culture shock because I had gotten my culture shock when I went up to New Hampshire the first time. But the size of school at Providence is it's such a small school. At times, in order to get some of that culture, you did have to go off campus, whether that be go to Brown University or just into the city in order to see some of what I was used to seeing when I was younger. So that was a way for me to kind of deal with that. But even going to high school in New Hampshire, I had a couple of students from my high school that went to Providence. And my high school was the same size as Providence College. So it was kind of like, wow, this is a really interesting dynamic. So when I look at it from a cultural standpoint, it's I think the thing that we have to really think about is it's such a small environment. Now, what we started to kind of come up against was when we did go off campus, and because, basketball players are quite tall and easily recognizable, sometimes we would run into racial issues off of campus. And it wasn't necessarily like if we were at another university. It would typically be like if we were in town or something, and you get different parts of Providence that that might have other cultures, and there could be a clash there. So a lot of times we had to kind of curtail our activity just to, quote unquote, to be safe, so that things wouldn't happen, and coach would be going crazy because some incident happened. And what I would hear or notice was a lot more of that tended to crop up a couple of years after we had left. There were more of those kind of racial clashes. But I didn't experience them so much on hand myself, but I would hear about them, maybe 3 to 5 years after I had graduated. So I always thought that was an interesting dynamic.
We all went to PC at different times, and again, the school has been, I think, especially recently, aggressive in creating a student body and environment that's welcoming to all. But it has been an issue, for a very, very long time. I'd love you guys to speak on, and again, Britt, I'll start with you on what was missing when you went to school there, most importantly, and what you'd like to see just moving forward with obviously what we're facing today, and just the evolution of just being a college institution, and the responsibility that you feel like the institution has in creating a learning environment for the entire student body, and specifically people of color.
Well, I think athletics does a great job with it, because for the most part, they recruit us. They're out telling us they want us. They want us to come and be a part of it. So I think outside of athletics, I think that the diversity training really needs to come to people that aren't in athletics, whether it be the faculty, staff, the administration, the school administration, just to have, a more understanding of what's going on within us as minorities. It's easy to say, Black Lives Matter, to put up a sign, put something on, Twitter that you're for the movement, but it's not about just that. We always say in basketball, it's not about how much you know. A kid doesn't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's about more than just words, not tolerant, have a zero tolerance for, racial issues. For some kid to yell out of a dorm window and call someone the N-word, or how many chances do you give that kid? At some point, Blacks feel invisible and feel like they don't matter, and that they have to take that. If a school has a zero tolerance policy for that, then, Blacks feel like they're part of the community, because the school and the environment they're in is not going to tolerate it. Right. So educating your, your faculty as well. So as they, teach, that they don't use microaggressions in teaching, because if I'm the only Black in the class and you're teaching something about civil rights and you keep asking me questions, well, I'm going to be sensitive about it. Right. So even teaching them, educate them. So overall, I just think it's not really as much about athletics as it is educating the whole university, other students, faculty, staff, so everyone basically takes responsibility for their actions, and helping people that don't look like them. So it's not just about Blacks, it's Asians, being welcoming to all people, Black, brown, LBGQ, welcome, making everybody feel like they're part of the community, because they're there because they want to be a part of the community.
Yeah, that's right. That is right. Meg, what do you have to speak on that? I don't know if that was Nick or James. Sorry about that. You guys can hop in.
That was Nick.
I was just going to say, Brett, I think you bring up some really great points. And one thing that I thought, you kind of touched on, is a dichotomy between athletics and the rest of the school. And as student athletes, we face both of those things, right? So we're not just athletes, right? So, we could have the most inclusive environment on our teams, within our department, we could do all the things, and yet we still have to take civ, and we still have to, be in different spaces as students. And so I think, when we start thinking about what we hope for the school, again, we always can do more in athletics, and we'll continue to push in that space. But I think you're right. We want to be leaders for the entire college. So how can, we set the pace and the tempo, so it's not just words, right? And I think that's something that's really important. And I think as we continue to push, I think one thing I'm proud of, especially with our student athletes, is that they're not just thinking about themselves as athletes. right? When they're talking about changes, they're talking about them as students. They're talking about how can we diversify our curriculum? How can we make more inclusive spaces for everybody? Yes, we got it good over here in athletics. We're doing some things, all that. But to see them really progressing and trying to make change, as students, to me is really inspiring. And I think the space that we need to continue to move in. And so, when you say, you're talking about faculty, using microaggressions, and you graduated in '86, it's sad to hear that. And, I'm sure Megan, I could see Megan, shaking her head like, yep, that happens. And she graduated, in 2019, right? So how can we start to make those changes so that, your story, Britt, is different than the story of a student athlete now, or, what I mean, a student of color today. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And I just wanted to hop in on that.
No, that's great. That's
I would
great.
love to jump in on,
I think, I'm sorry. I think Providence College provides students with a great education. And one of their missions is to provide a great education to help people become great thinkers and use that process to apply it in the real world and make a difference. That's part of the mission of Providence College. Well, in today's environment, to be a great thinker, it also means to be able to think things out well when it comes to racial issues. Black, white, doesn't matter your color. But like they provide us with Western Civ, and I've heard it change since I was there because I was brutal when I was there. And if they're doing Western civilization, why can't they also have a course on racial issues,
Right.
or diversity for all students that go through to help prepare them for the real world? Because once you get in the real world, you face a lot of different situations where it comes down to race, and how do you deal with that? If you're Friar, have you been educated in how to deal with it in an effective manner?
No, that's great. That's great. Meg, anything you want to add to it?
Yeah, just something that Britt just talked about, actually. So she talked about potentially like a course or something that the student body would need to go through, because I agree 100% with what Nick and Britt are saying. Within athletics, I mean, they understand the things that need to happen, and they're putting through the effort and putting their time into making those changes. The problem comes with regards to the rest of the student body. And I think it's a little bit of a deeper rooted issue because of where these students come from. I think the United States as a whole needs to change to be able to, move forward through this. But there is actually, and this might be changed, I don't know, but there was a diversity course requirement that students have to take, but I think the course requirement doesn't do enough. So for mine specifically, I took sociology. Nothing about diversity is talked about that. It's more of within society how people are different. But I think if there was a way that requirement was more into diversity with regards to understanding different backgrounds and where students come from and the different lives that we live, because the problem is these students are coming from places where everyone looks the same and everyone grows up the exact same. So if you don't understand someone else's experience, you're going to think that they're odd or that they don't matter because they didn't do as many cool things that I did. I went to the Cape every summer and I did this. I've been to 8 countries and stuff like that. Like, you're going to think someone else's experience isn't as valid as yours. So if there's a way that we can make changes within, the courses that we have to take, that would be amazing. I don't know what the school is trying to do, and they definitely probably have some stuff in the works, but.
No, that's exactly right. And that kind of trends right into what I wanted to talk about next. So with the nature of my job and working with professional athletes so closely, and the spirit of what's going on over the last couple of months, now is just having them understand their responsibility, as professional athletes and having a microphone and who they are in society. But, given the fact that we all live in our own bubbles, right? To where now, all of us are extended from Providence College, yet we understand the experience of the students of color, because it's not any different. What we realize today is that it's not different from our experiences at all, right? But being able to be voices now to make the change, right? So everyone, all the students coming up behind us can have a different experience, because again, we all pretty much had the similar experiences, and that's our responsibility, and that's something that I've woken up to, over the last to 8 months that I need to do it. And hopefully you guys all feel the same. So I think it's still up to us to speak out and put our heads together, not just to talk about these things, but actually do something about it, right? Because if we're not the ones to do it and push the envelope, then it won't get done. And I think that the school understands that as well now, more so than ever. And that's the reason why we're all here today having this conversation. They've reached out to all of us specifically, and that's the blessing in itself, to be able to create the change. But now it's to create the initiatives to make that change. So the conversations can be different, the experiences can be different, and it can lead to even more change moving forward. And I want you guys all to speak on that. I'm actually going to put a little bit of pressure on you on what you can do possibly better to make the next student of color's experience at Providence College better moving forward. Start with you, Meg.
Yeah, definitely. So, I was part of that committee back in 2019 that helped out with Nick getting hired to his position. And so I would love to, still be involved with regards to diversity in that way moving forward. But I think something for volleyball specifically, we're a really, tight-knit community, and I still get emails from Coach Royer all the time and text messages from her. So I want to be able to be a resource to any of those student athletes moving forward in the future. As a biology major, there's not a lot of minority students within biology. So if there are any, and even if you aren't of minority, needing help to, move through those types of fields, because science in general is not dominated by women or minority or any of that. So I'm a big advocate for, pushing women and minorities in science to try and change the way we think of things. And trying to move the scientific field into the future, into new innovative fields and things like that. So I want to be a resource to all the student athletes in the future who, are looking for a job. I currently work at the National Institute of Health. Those students coming from PC can do it too. You don't have to do anything fancy. You don't have to come from a top science school within the country to be able doing this type of work. So.
That's great. That's great. Britt?
Well, basically, like what Megan said, I think, I coach at Bryant, so I'm back in Rhode Island. I've been here for the last 6 years. And, we play Providence College, so I do talk to the young ladies on the team, and they all know I played at PC. And I always challenge them to try to break some of my records that I have there that still have been broken. I guess I got to throw that in too. They still have broken my records. But I would love to, be more of take a mentorship with them. It's just my schedule sometimes gets so busy, because when I see them, sometimes I kind of know what they feel, how they feel. Sometimes just because I've been in their shoes. Mm-hmm. So I wish I had more time, and more people that went to school when I went there would reach out and be more of a mentor. Because not everybody had a great experience. Some of the minorities that went through it, they're not real happy with the experience, but I think they all agree we got a great education. And I think that would help the new generation if we came back and help mentor them, because some of the struggles they may be feeling, especially emotionally, we've been there, and to share our stories of how we made it through, how we were able to not transfer, not leave, but stay and get a degree, and where we are today. And the things that happened to us at Providence that made us stronger people and prepared us for the real world. Yeah. So, mentorship. And I say that, and I probably should be trying to spend more time making that happen, seeing I'm less than 2 miles from Providence College.
That's great. James, what do you think? Give me your 2 cents.
I think the mentorship and is very, very important, but something that you mentioned a little bit earlier, and we talked about leadership. And for me, in my role at Columbia University now and what I do professionally, sometimes when you asked the question earlier about what could Providence be doing, I would love to see more people in leadership positions at the school. I think it's wonderful that we have all these initiatives, but the thing that I tend to see is, if you look at when Britt graduated and when I graduated and when the two younger students graduated, some of the issues are all the same because we're putting together these initiatives to kind of attack this issue. But I think more importantly, if you have people in leadership positions, whether they be on the board of trustees, you might be able to filter down more of what's actually happening and how that can impact the university as a whole.
Mhm.
So it may relate to curriculum development, something I do at Columbia University. And you start to get into some of the issues that were mentioned earlier with like the sensitivities around teaching and unimplied bias and things like that. So for me, I would love to see the school start to push some leadership positions outside of sports in the decision-making areas and board of trustees areas. And I think once you have that thread from trustee all the way through to the people doing like activist programs, then you can probably really start to make some change. So
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Good
It's just
point.
a double on what you just mentioned, James, and what Britt said before is again a top-down approach. Again on the standpoint of leadership and creating a community that looks like that has some type of diversity. That's where it starts, because you can't recruit diversity if you don't have a student body. I mean, you don't have a leadership that's diverse as well too, right? And understanding the issues that need to take place and the initiatives that need to take place, but most importantly, making sure that they're actually activated. Is very, very much important. Again, it's a hot topic now. Everybody's talking about it, but what's really going to get done at the end of the day? And you really can't really have that as a thread within the establishment and the institution if the leadership doesn't look different. So again, it starts very, very much there to identify the issues, keep the conversations warm, start the initiatives, and make it the fabric of the institution. Nick, I'll let you speak on that as well too, please.
Yeah, you guys bring up a lot of great points, and sometimes it's strange for me being both a panelist and someone who works at PC in this particular field. So I'm like, there's some things we're doing, but no, I really agree, and I think one thing that I'm cautiously optimistic about, not only just as an employee, but just someone who's an alum of PC, is that I'm hoping, truthfully, that in this wave, right, that Rudy, you're kind of talking about this time period, right, that it's now at the forefront of our minds, that it's embedded in our DNA now. And even when we're not talking as heavily about systemic injustice, when things start to maybe cool down, so to speak, we're still moving at the same intensity and pace because the issues are that prevalent. So yes, it's great that we have this momentum and we're having these conversations during this, 4, 5, 6 month period right now, but how can we really continue to sustain that? Because ultimately it's sustained energy and sustained growth that really makes that impact, right? So that when we do this panel 10 years from now, we have someone from the class of, 2028, what they're talking about hopefully has changed from, what we've been talking about today. So I'm really hopeful that those changes are both sustainable and long lasting, because I think there are some really great efforts being done right now. And even we just launched a DEI trustee committee, which is fantastic and something that has never been done before. But I'm really hopeful that, while it's born out of this, moment in time and this sense of urgency, that it'll still have the weight and the importance and the value, down the line. Because I think right now, the feet are on the fire when it comes to DEI. Now everybody's having to kind of move in almost in a frantic space, where when we really want some really great change, you want to be able to move in both spaces. Yeah, when your feet's under the fire, can you move effectively? But when you're not under the pressure, can you still move effectively? Can you still make those changes? And that's kind of my hope for all of this, that we continue to move in that regard.
So we have 2 questions from the audience today that we'd like to address and pose to our panelists. The first one is, as you reflect on your PC years, what bothers you now that didn't bother you then when you were a PC student? So Meg, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I think the biggest thing now revolves around politics, actually. So back in college, I did my duty and voted as you're supposed to do, but politics really wasn't, consumed my life. Over the past, how long have we been in pandemic? However long that's been, politics have really consumed my life, and you can see how people perceive themselves and show their support for a party. And it really just rubs me the wrong way, actually, sometimes. For example, when President Donald Trump was in Walter Reed, recovering from COVID-19, his supporters decided to flood the streets outside of his hospital. And that actually made me very concerned and worried, because I actually work on that street. I see Walter Reed from where I sit at my desk. So how those supporters were, demonstrating their support for Donald Trump or President Trump and the Republican Party, it actually frightened a lot of me and my coworkers from going into work during that time. So back when I was in college, I really didn't think about these things, and I had my political views, but nowadays I think it's just on a whole different level of how we see ourselves within the community.
James, thank you.
Yeah, for me, as I had mentioned before, I had gotten injured. So having that serious injury, I was able to get some time. And when I had that free time, I actually went to my coaching staff and demanded a couple of different internships, because I had interest in possibly going to law school. And then I wanted to have an internship in sports marketing at the Providence Civic Center. The thing that bothers me now is I would love to see PC support its athletes with more opportunities like that. I would love to see them get more involved in what their interests are outside of the playing field or the court, and have them doing internships or some kind of involvement in their field of study. I think that would go a long way in helping our student athletes become more rounded as they graduate and move on to their professional careers. That's what I would love to see, that I didn't really affect or notice when I was a student.
You think that that's the responsibility of the coach or the institution at large, or the athletic department?
I think really it's going to end up being a combination of them all. A lot of times you'll have to kind of pull in curriculum to a certain extent in order to support somebody in a particular area. That's going to take more than just the coach. Back in the day when I played, yeah, a lot of times your coach would do that for you. But if it was kind of backed by the university and their career services, that would make a more holistic program. So I think if you can combine all those entities and they get on the same page, you could probably do more for the student athlete moving forward.
Right, I agree. Nick?
Yeah, to add on to James's point, I think that we've made some good progress as far as trying to work creatively around those demands of our athletes, right? So now we're in a spot where a lot of our athletes are here over the summer or over here over the winter, and how do we give them those opportunities? So if it's a winter 2-week internship or getting creative. So, I definitely think that is something, we've been trying to work on, but I agree with you. It's something that, again, hopefully we can continue to do to be more well-rounded as we graduate. I think for me, some things that used to bother, things that didn't bother me then that I think is something that I'm focused on now is I think that we used to be more afraid to have these conversations. And I think now when we talk about, supporting our student athletes of color, it does require you to be potentially uncomfortable and have those conversations. I think back then, whether you didn't know or you were just afraid, you didn't really talk to a lot of your student athletes about some of these things that we've all been wrestling with. And so I think now that's something that I'm trying to impress upon as many of our folk as we can about, having those conversations. And it might not be perfect, but knowing that someone is thinking about, my mental health as it relates to, police brutality would go a long way. When I was a senior, knowing that that was there. And so really just kind of building that up. And I think our athletes now and just the 21st century athlete now is really pushing for that. Coaches can't be silent anymore, trying to really sort of engage, and not in a performative way, right? Like Britt was saying earlier on in the conversation, not just the t-shirt that says Black Lives Matter, but really engaging with them, because ultimately your coaches and, your teammates are your closest support network. And so if they know that, they're supporting you and all of you, right, all of the things that you deal with, I think that could go a really long way.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great point. Britt?
Just to build on what Nick and James were talking about, being in athletics for the last 25 years, I've got an opportunity to see how different institutions handle different opportunities for student athletes. And here at Bryant, they actually have a career day for student athletes. And because our schedules are so, busy, it's in the evening, and the student athletes can come in their practice gear, their uniforms, whatever they're in. And the employers know that student athletes are coming from practice, before or after practice, so they get interviewed in their environment, and they don't have to stress about, I got to go put on a suit and tie. The employers know their student athletes, and they get an opportunity to go around to different, booths and, find out more information and get these internships and opportunities to get a job before they graduate. And I think that's very important, especially for student athletes who don't have the time sometimes to do internships, and sometimes don't have the time to build those networking relationships. So, and just to answer your question, one of the things that, at the time didn't bother me, but as I look back on my career, we really didn't have any minority coaches. When Stu Jackson was hired by Rick Pitino, it was like, whoa, a black guy. I mean, we were like excited, and we, on the women's side, my senior year, Kathy Parson, and that was my first black member of a coaching staff. And now that I'm in coaching and I look back at my career, for me to have a minority as a mentor, on staff, I think would have done wonders and helped me, progress in my career and as an individual.
Well, I wanted to chime in on that because that was a big reason why I decided to go there. And that's who recruited me.
Yeah.
Stu Jackson recruited you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And, when you talk about sport and it being a small world, so Stu recruits me, he's at the Big East. I go get a graduate degree from Columbia University. My teacher is Val Ackerman, who's now the commissioner of the Big East, and Stu works for her, so it's a small world.
Small world.
And to have, it was something that we weren't really able to get into, but it's kind of to have those mentors or to have those people that you can look up to in those positions. It does make a difference.
Yeah, and to add on to what James just said, I think, and I think you had mentioned it a little bit earlier, but as we continue to look forward, I think those types of things do make such a big difference. And for me, even part of the reason why I wanted to come back was I know I would have benefited from having someone in my role or someone like me working in athletics, right? Or, if you had a coach, a black coach at a particular spot, like you would have benefited from that as a student athlete. So I think about that, in our sort of responsibilities, if we have that opportunity to give back, recognizing that someone like you probably could appreciate you in that space. And so I always kind of utilize that as, some of that purpose and that why of why I continue to do the work is, I know somebody, from Bloomfield, Connecticut might want to come to PC and would really appreciate, having someone who's looking out for them and all of that.
100%. So one more question from the people that are listening in today. The last question here is, what can Providence College do to further DEI every day? And then I'll start with you, Nick. Go ahead and take it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure who asked it.
You being Mr. Faculty Member and all that. Go ahead.
Right, I got to start. I think one thing, I think if we start to think of DEI not as an extra thing, but a part of everything, I feel like we'll go a long way. Because oftentimes for people of color, we live a lot of these experiences every day. So it's part of our fabric. But for those who don't have, our identities, it's oftentimes seen as an added thing. And if it's an added thing, then we might not necessarily pay it as much mind or as much value or we might get busy with other stuff, right? But when we think about every single thing we do with an inclusive lens, with an ear towards equity, if we think about how we can be more diverse in all that we do and not think of it as an additional thing, I think we'll really make some strong progress. So really sort of embedding it into the fabric is what I'd say we could do every single day to improve DEI.
That's great. Britt, what do you think?
I agree with Nick. I mean, when you go on a diet, they say make lifestyle changes. You don't just make temporary changes, and the same thing with diversity is something that's got to be part of your fabric, and not wait for an incident to happen to now try to put out a fire and say, we care about diversity. I mean, you got to make sure that that's something that's just, like he said, part of your fabric, something that's part of who you are.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Meg, what do you think?
I agree with both of them. I actually went to the NCAA Diversity and Inclusion Fair my senior year. I was invited by some of the people within the athletics department to attend the meeting. And something that has stuck with me since then was one of the presenters said, rather than it's not diversity, inclusion, and equity, it's diversity and it's infusion. It's taking all those things and infusing it into your day-to-day life. So if we're able to implement kind of what we talked about earlier, putting it, ingraining it within the curriculum, it's taking that and infusing it to the rest of the school and into our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, for sure. James, what do you think? Thanks for that.
Yeah, for me, like when we consult to corporations, a lot of times diversity is a big issue as it relates to leadership. I think what we're not talking about is, if we look at the globe or the world in general, there are more people of minority standing than Caucasian standing. And as we look to kind of help corporations, and I'll go on a little bit after that, but we look to help corporations, those different perspectives are what helps people relate to people in all these different areas. So I agree with what most of the panelists said. I always feel like it is always brought in as an add-on. And if it was more of an inclusion thing, it would carry more weight and go a lot further. And when you have it at the leadership position or perspective, then things get included from a budget standpoint, from a strategy standpoint and so forth. So for me, if you can start to get the inclusion at that level, I think it will make or go a long way in people kind of it then becoming more the norm. That's what I think we're all really striving for.
Yeah, agreed. And again, just to piggyback on what we've said before and what a lot of you guys touched on, the time is now. The school and the establishment's definitely awake to these new initiatives and what the issues are. And it's up to us to gravitate to them and actually work with the students, student body, and the leaders and the faculty to make these changes as well too. So I think everybody does have the responsibility, and I think together we can do that and make change. And again, we weren't having these types of panels and these discussions years ago. So again, kudos to everybody that put this together. Thank you for giving us a platform to speak on these issues. And again, hopefully this discussion will ring to a lot of people that are watching now and are going to watch moving forward to inspire them to make a change and make PC a better place for all. So thank you again.